Some stories don't begin with a scream. They begin with a pause, a breath held too long, a truth swallowed because speaking it would change everything. This is one of those stories. I didn't plan to become a woman who measured her life in lies discovered and silences endured. But betrayal has a way of rewriting who you are. What you're about to hear isn't about sudden rage or dramatic explosions. It's about patience, observation, and the quiet power of knowing more than the person who hurt you realizes. I'm telling this now because secrets don't disappear when you hide them. They grow. And sometimes, if you let them, they turn into karma all on their own. I never thought silence could feel heavier than screaming. But that's exactly how it felt the morning I realized my marriage was already broken. The house was still, the kind of quiet that usually felt safe, familiar, earned after years of shared routines. Mark was in the shower upstairs, the water running steady, predictable, like everything he pretended our life still was. I stood in the kitchen wiping the counter that was already clean when his tablet lit up on the island. One soft chime, one screen glow. I told myself not to look. I already knew. Still, my eyes moved before my mind could stop them, and there it was. Her name, Lena, the coworker he said was just good at spreadsheets. My chest tightened, not from shock, but from confirmation. I didn't open the message. That's the part people don't understand when I tell this later. They ask, why didn't you read it right away? But reading it would have made it real in a way I wasn't ready to survive. I locked the screen and leaned against the counter, breathing slowly. You okay down there? Mark called from the bathroom. His voice sounded normal, too normal. Yeah, I answered, just making coffee. Save me a cup, he said. Of course, I replied, because lies had already become part of our language. We'd been married 11 years. Not perfect years, but real ones. Shared holidays, inside jokes, arguments about paint colors and grocery lists. I thought that kind of history meant something permanent. I thought love aged into loyalty. I was wrong. Over the past few months, things had shifted in small ways I tried not to name. Late nights at work, his phone always face down. That distant look in his eyes when I spoke, like he was listening to someone else in his head. I told myself it was stress. Promotions did that to people. Ambition made them tired. At company dinners, Lena was always nearby. She laughed a little too loudly at Mark's jokes. She touched his arm when she spoke. I noticed because I notice everything. When you've been with someone long enough, you learn their patterns, their tells. Mark leaned toward her without realizing it. Just an inch, just enough. One night after another team dinner, I asked casually, so how's Lena doing? She seems busy lately. He didn't look at me when he answered. Yeah, she's swamped. Good worker though. That's nice, I said, watching his jaw tight. After that, I stopped asking questions out loud and started asking them privately. I began writing things down in a small notebook I kept in my purse. Dates, times, excuses, working late, conference call, client dinner. I didn't know why I was doing it at first. Maybe I needed proof for myself. Maybe I needed control over something when everything else felt uncertain. Weeks passed like that, me smiling, him pretending. Us moving around each other carefully, like furniture in a room rearranged just enough to feel wrong. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because crying felt like giving up information. Silence became my shield. One evening, while folding laundry, I heard Mark on the phone in the bedroom. His voice dropped, softened in a way it never did with me anymore. I stood still, a shirt hanging from my hands. Yeah, he said quietly. Soon, I just need the timing right. There was a pause, I held my breath. No, she doesn't know, he continued. After the promotion, that's when I'll tell her. My stomach turned cold. I know, he said, I promise. When he came out and saw me, he jumped slightly. Hey, how long have you been there? Just walked in, I lied. He nodded, relief flashing across his face before he masked it. That was work. Of course, I said. That was the moment everything changed. The affair wasn't just happening. It was planned, timed, strategized. I realized then that Mark hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He had rearranged his future without me and expected me to stand still until he was ready to discard me gently. That night, I lay awake listening to him breathe beside me. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who trusted without question, the one who believed honesty would always be enough. I closed my eyes and made a decision I didn't yet fully understand. I wouldn't confront him, not yet. I would learn everything first. Because if Mark thought I was still in the dark, he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The days after I overheard that phone call were a blur of quiet observation and careful planning. I started by reviewing every interaction Mark had with Lena that I could track, piecing together a timeline. My small notebook became a chronicle of betrayal, each entry more detailed than the last. Dates, times, locations, odd excuses, strange text notifications. I even noted his tone during calls with me versus calls with her. I realized I was building a map, a trail that would prove what I already knew. He had chosen to deceive me, to hide behind lies and sweet words meant for someone else. One morning, I quietly asked, Mark, can I borrow your phone to check a calendar thing? He looked at me suspiciously. Sure, what's wrong? Nothing. Just trying to organize my schedule. He handed it over, trusting me, or at least thinking he could still manipulate me. That's when I started taking screenshots. I documented messages, timestamps, even emoji patterns. Nothing obvious, nothing incriminating in isolation, but together, the puzzle revealed itself. The affair wasn't random, it was meticulously planned. Later at home, I laid out all my notes and screenshots. I whispered to myself, I have everything now. Every lie, every excuse, every hidden weekend. I felt a strange mix of anger and clarity. The betrayal cut deep, but the clarity made the pain bearable. Finally, I decided it was time to confront him. I didn't yell. I didn't storm into the bedroom like a scene from a movie. I walked into the living room with my notebook, slid it across the coffee table, and said, We need to talk. Mark froze. What's that? Read it, I said softly. His face went pale as he flipped the pages. How did you? I've been paying attention, I said. For months, I know everything. He swallowed hard, eyes darting. It's not what it looks like. It is, I replied. Don't lie to me. He shook his head. It's complicated, I didn't mean. Complicated doesn't excuse betrayal, I said. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. I just wanted to wait until after the promotion to tell you. That's all. I didn't want to hurt you. You've hurt me every day, I said. Every late night, every hidden text, every small lie. And now I know everything. There was a long silence. Then he whispered, Please, don't ruin my career, don't tell anyone. I tilted my head. I'll think about it, I said carefully. His eyes widened. You're not going to. You've been thinking about your career while thinking about her, I said. Now I get to think about what's fair. He flopped onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. I can fix this, I can. You've had months to try, I interrupted. It's too late for that. That night he slept on the couch. I stayed awake in the bedroom, notebook open, mind racing. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt patient, calculating. I realized confrontation alone wouldn't bring me peace. It wouldn't repair the humiliation, the small betrayals, the quiet erosion of trust. I needed accountability, not chaos. The next morning, Mark tried to make things normal again. Coffee? He asked, holding a mug like nothing had happened. No, thank you, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Are you really going to do this? Do what? I asked, opening a folder on my laptop. The truth always matters. You've been careless with it for too long. He glanced at the notebook on the table. You haven't? I have, I said calmly. I just haven't moved yet. Mark's face was a mixture of confusion and fear. You could just let it go. We can pretend none of this happened. We can start fresh. Start fresh, I repeated. After months of lies, after planning an entire affair behind my back, he didn't respond. He just sat there silent, realizing the power had shifted. Over the next few days, I watched him closely. He apologized, tried to buy forgiveness with small gestures, flowers, breakfast in bed, even a handwritten note. I'll make it up to you, he said. I smiled faintly. You've made up enough excuses already. I can fix this, he persisted. Fix what? I asked. You've already broken it. And I'm not the one who needs fixing. He didn't know it yet, but I had started setting something else in motion. Patience was my ally, and observation my weapon. I let him believe the confrontation had scared me into submission. I let him think his career, and our marriage could be saved with groveling and guilt. One evening, while clearing the dinner dishes, I casually asked, Remember that weekend you said was a work retreat? He stiffened. Yeah, what about it? I put the plate down. Funny how that coincides with Lena's birthday. He froze. I'm not accusing you, I said softly. I'm just noting patterns. They're interesting, don't you think? Mark said nothing. He couldn't, not without exposing himself further. By the end of the week, he started questioning himself, the little lies, the hidden moments, the texts he thought I would never see. His apologies became anxious, less confident. I can explain. You've had all the time in the world to explain, I said. Now it's about what you've done. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice trembling. Accountability, I said. Not drama, not chaos. Just the truth in a way that finally matters. He didn't realize yet that the moment I decided not to confront him with anger, I had gained control. Every lie he tried to cover, every excuse he whispered, only cemented the evidence I had collected. I wasn't just waiting for a confession. I was planning something that would make the truth unavoidable. Something that didn't rely on threats or yelling. Something that would teach both him and Lena a lesson, without me stooping to humiliation. The house felt quieter than usual that night. Mark slept fitfully on the couch, occasionally muttering apologies in his dreams. I stayed awake in bed, notebook open, mind racing. I knew the next move had to be deliberate. It wasn't enough to just prove him wrong or to confront him and walk away. The betrayal was deeper than that. Lena's presence, the planning, the manipulation, it all needed to be addressed in a way that left no room for excuses. I whispered to myself, "You think I don't know. You think I'm just hurting quietly. But you're about to find out that patience can be as sharp as any confrontation." And as I finally turned off the bedside lamp, I felt the weight of weeks of secret observation lift slightly, replaced by a resolve that had nothing to do with anger. This wasn't about getting even in the moment. This was about making sure that every lie, every betrayal, every calculated move they had made would have consequences. The next morning I carried myself differently. Mark noticed it immediately. You seem calm," he said hesitantly over breakfast. "I am calm," I replied, pouring coffee into my cup. "Calm is different from forgiving." He didn't respond, only stared at me with a growing sense of unease. That was all the confirmation I needed. The silent shift in power had begun. And as I took a sip of coffee, watching him squirm under the weight of unspoken truths, I realized that for the first time in months, I was in control, not him. Over the next several days, I continued my careful documentation, cross-referencing dates, noting every discrepancy in his stories. Each message screenshot, each calendar note, each observation was a brushstroke painting a portrait of betrayal that was undeniable. I even set up a small system on my laptop to organize everything neatly, like evidence ready to be presented to someone who could act on it. One evening, Mark said, "I don't understand why you're still keeping that notebook. Haven't we talked about this?" I smiled faintly. "We've talked about a lot of things. But some truths aren't meant for discussion, they're meant to be seen." He swallowed. I'm trying." "Trying isn't enough," I said. "Not anymore." And with that, I knew that my next move wouldn't be confrontation, it would be strategy. Every step he took from that point forward, every lie he tried to spin, every attempt at reconciliation would only feed the evidence I had meticulously gathered. By the end of the week, Mark began questioning not just me but himself. "Are you really watching everything?" "I've always watched," I said calmly. "I just didn't tell you until now." He looked down, shame and fear mingling on his face. I didn't think." "You didn't think," I repeated, letting the words hang in the air like a sentence waiting to be served. That night I closed my notebook and whispered to myself, "Patience is a weapon, and it's time to aim carefully." I knew the confrontation alone had been necessary, but it wasn't enough. The next phase, what came after proof and confession, would need to be precise, deliberate, and measured. Mark didn't realize it yet, but every move he made, every apology, every attempt to convince me of his remorse, was playing into the next stage of my plan. By the time I went to bed, I was no longer the wife who had been blindsided. I was the architect of a careful reckoning, and soon, the truth would no longer be something I kept quiet. It would be something they could not avoid. And as I turned off the lights, letting darkness fill the room, I felt a strange sense of calm. Because I knew one undeniable fact. Every secret has a way of finding the light, and when it does, no one escapes the consequences. The stage was set, the pieces were in place, and soon, both Mark and Lena would learn that patience, observation, and silent resolve could wield a power far stronger than anger or shouting ever could. The quiet had shifted, and so had I. The reckoning was coming, and they didn't see it yet. Revenge didn't come from anger, it came from patience. After the confrontation, I let Mark believe we were slowly rebuilding, that maybe, with enough apologies, everything could go back to how it used to be. I nodded at him during breakfast. I smiled faintly when he handed me coffee. I even let him touch my hand once as if forgiveness had begun. All the while behind that calm exterior, I was quietly gathering everything I needed to ensure the betrayal couldn't be hidden any longer. I contacted an attorney to understand my options, carefully sharing the timeline screenshots and notes I had meticulously compiled. "You have a very strong case," she said, reviewing my files. "Not just for legal purposes but also to protect yourself if things get messy. This is thorough." I nodded. "Good. That's what I want. I want them to face the consequences but without unnecessary drama." One day, as I reviewed messages for the umpteenth time, a thought struck me. Lena had a fiancé, someone who trusted her completely, and yet here she was betraying both me and him. That was a lever I could use, not cruelly but truthfully. I didn't contact him immediately. I waited for the perfect moment. Mark was obsessed with his promotion at work, and I realized that timing would be critical. If I struck too soon, my plan would unravel. Too late, and he might slip away without facing the repercussions. Meanwhile, Mark tried to bridge the growing gap between us. "I can make this right," he whispered one night, leaning over my shoulder while I reviewed work emails. "You've already made your choice," I said softly, not looking up. "I didn't mean for any of this to hurt you," he added. "But it did," I replied. "Every single day." He hesitated. "I can fix things, I just need control." I interrupted. "You've been controlling the narrative for months. Now it's my turn." The next week, I prepared an anonymous package for HR containing all the verified messages, calendar conflicts, and company policy references that would prove the affair and the professional misconduct associated with it. I wrapped it carefully, no extra words, no emotion, just facts. When I dropped it off, I knew it would spark investigation without me needing to step forward. Then came the twist I hadn't fully anticipated. While I was drafting a gentle message to Lena's fiancé, I discovered that Lena had been planning a move far more audacious than I realized. There were hints of her intending to leverage the affair for career advancement in ways that could impact Mark directly. My blood ran cold at first, but then I saw opportunity. This revelation didn't change my plan, it strengthened it. She wasn't just betraying me, she was overreaching, and karma would follow her even more swiftly. The day I met Lena's fiancé, I felt an odd mix of nerves and certainty. He didn't know who I was, only that I had information he needed to see. "I don't know you," he said, eyebrows furrowed as I slid the envelope across the table. "I know you don't," I said gently. "But I thought you should know the truth before it's too late. It's about Lena." And Marky opened it cautiously, hands trembling. This is all verified." "Yes," I said. "I double-checked everything. I just wanted you to have the truth." He looked up, eyes wide, shaking his head. I can't believe this." "I thought sometimes the people we trust most are the ones we need to watch," I said softly. The way he clutched the envelope, the pale color of his face, reminded me that I wasn't the only one wounded. The consequences were beginning to ripple outward. I felt a quiet satisfaction, not from malice, but from knowing justice was unfolding naturally. Meanwhile, Mark sensed the shift before it was even visible. "Did you do something?" he asked one evening, his tone sharp but uncertain. "I don't need to," I replied. "Truth has a way of surfacing on its own." "Are you saying HR?" "I'm saying everything matters," I said calmly, sipping my tea. "Every lie, every hidden plan, every betrayal. You've underestimated me for too long." The next morning, news came slowly but unmistakably. Mark's promotion was pulled pending investigation. Lena stopped coming to work altogether. Rumors swirled, questions were asked, whispers of ethical violations and personal indiscretions floated through the office. Mark tried to confront me. "Did you do this?" he asked, a hint of panic in his voice. I looked him in the eye and smiled faintly. "The truth always finds its way out. You don't need me for that." He sank into a chair, head in hands. "But how?" I thought. "I let the evidence speak," I said. "And karma has a way of handling those who think they can manipulate everything." As the days passed, Mark's demeanor changed. He no longer attempted charm or flattery. He didn't try to apologize anymore, at least not convincingly. He understood, finally, that control had shifted. The humiliation, though subtle, was effective. It didn't need shouting or confrontation. It simply existed in the way people looked at him at the office, the quiet whispers, the polite avoidance. I continued to observe from a distance, never gloating, simply taking note of the consequences of his choices. Lena's fiancé, after a short period of disbelief and anger, ended his engagement. The truth had landed squarely where it needed to. I felt a sense of calm, knowing my method had been precise and measured. One evening, Mark approached me cautiously. You could have ruined me completely, he whispered. I've never wanted to ruin you, I said softly. I've only wanted honesty. And now you're facing the truth. He nodded slowly, as if absorbing something he had ignored for years. I understand. Yes, I said. You understand consequences. And in that moment, I realized that revenge doesn't need to be loud to be effective. It can be quiet, calculated, patient. It can be a series of small, deliberate actions that allow truth and justice to unfold naturally. Over the next few weeks, the office settled into a new rhythm. Mark's reputation shifted, Lena's absence was noted, and those who had remained oblivious began to grasp the reality of the situation. I watched silently, learning a strange kind of satisfaction from the way life balanced itself. I even allowed a small conversation with Mark one afternoon. Do you feel like you've learned something? I asked. I think so, he admitted. I never realized how much secrecy could hurt someone. How carefully people watch without showing it. Exactly, I said. And now you know. He stayed silent after that, which was exactly what I wanted. He didn't try to explain, to argue, or to charm his way out. He understood, finally, the cost of his actions. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I reflected on the path I had taken. The careful documentation, the strategic revelation to Lena's fiancé, the anonymous reporting, all of it had been precise. I hadn't acted out of anger. I hadn't sought to humiliate or destroy for the sake of satisfaction. I had acted to restore balance, to allow truth and accountability to take center stage. And I realized something unexpected. By choosing patience over confrontation, observation over emotion, I had preserved my own sense of integrity. I hadn't stooped to manipulation or malice. I had simply allowed the consequences of betrayal to manifest naturally. The twist in the tale, the revelation about Lena's audacious plans, had made me even more certain of the power of timing. Had I acted too soon, she might have escaped scrutiny. Had I hesitated too long, Mark could have maneuvered out of reach. But every careful step had paid off. I whispered to myself as I closed my laptop, patience is not weakness, silence is not ignorance. And revenge, when measured with precision, can be as quiet as the truth itself. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of peace. The consequences were unfolding. Karma, in its quiet way, was doing the work that needed doing. Mark had learned. Lena had learned. And I had learned, most importantly, that true justice doesn't need theatrics. It needs clarity, observation, and the willingness to act at the exact right moment. The power had shifted permanently, and they both knew it. And yet, as I sat in the stillness of my apartment, I realized that the final act, the closure, the ultimate reckoning, was still ahead. Because while consequences had begun to manifest, the full weight of truth had not yet settled completely. I smiled faintly, feeling the tension of weeks start to release. The stage was set. The players had moved. And soon, everything would reach the conclusion it deserved. The reckoning wasn't over. It was only beginning. Karma arrived quietly, like everything else in this story. By the time the office settled into a new rhythm, Mark wasn't fired, but his reputation had shifted in subtle yet permanent ways. He no longer commanded the same respect from colleagues. Whispers followed him down the hallway, polite nods replaced smiles, and invitations to casual lunches disappeared. It was as if the air itself carried the knowledge of his choices, and every step he took reminded him that deceit leaves traces. Lena's engagement had ended, her absence from work noted with hushed curiosity. She avoided eye contact whenever our paths crossed, and I could see the unease in her posture, the tightness around her shoulders. There was no dramatic confrontation, no loud accusations, just a quiet, pervasive acknowledgement that the consequences of her actions had arrived. I felt no triumph, only a calm satisfaction, because justice, when allowed to unfold naturally, carries a weight far stronger than humiliation ever could. I filed for separation with clarity instead of rage. Mark came into the apartment one evening, holding flowers, and attempted one last apology. I know I hurt you, he said, his voice tentative, and I'm sorry, I never meant for it to go this far. I looked at him, calmly setting my teacup on the table. I know what you meant, I replied. But intention doesn't erase consequences. You've faced them, and now it's time to accept them fully. He lowered his head, swallowing hard. I just thought I could fix it. That maybe you'd forgive me. Forgiveness isn't about making me feel better, I said softly. It's about accountability. You've been accountable, you've faced the truth. That's what matters. I didn't realize, he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. You didn't, I said gently, and that's why this happened. You didn't consider the weight of secrecy, the cost of betrayal. I did. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I felt the calm that comes when the storm has passed, when the tension of weeks and months finally loosens its grip. Mark's eyes lingered on me, searching for some reaction I no longer had. He saw only the clarity in my gaze, the quiet strength that came from enduring and observing, from letting the truth rise instead of chasing it with anger. Healing began when I chose honesty over fear. I didn't expose them to humiliate or punish. I exposed them because lies cannot sustain themselves, and the burden of carrying deceit falls heaviest on the betrayers. I moved into a smaller place, a space that felt like mine for the first time in over a decade. The walls were quiet, the light soft, and I slept better than I had in years. Each night, I reminded myself that the secret I had carried, the evidence I had gathered, and the patience I had practiced, had not only preserved my dignity, but also allowed the natural course of justice to take hold. Mark tried to salvage what remained of our life together. Do you think we can ever be friends? He asked cautiously one afternoon, glancing at me over the edge of the table. I shook my head softly. Not friends, but I can respect that the truth has been revealed and that accountability has been met. He nodded, a trace of relief mingled with regret. I understand. I hope you do, I said. Understanding is the first step toward real change. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Mark adjusted to the quiet consequences at work. Lena retreated from the circles she once navigated confidently, and I allowed myself to step fully into my own life. I discovered small joys in routines I had neglected, friendships I had overlooked, and passions I had set aside. It was a reminder that survival is not simply enduring. It is reclaiming the parts of yourself that betrayal seeks to suppress. One evening, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. I reflected on the journey, the quiet months of observation, the meticulous gathering of evidence, the strategic release of information, and the way karma had unfolded with its own rhythm. I realized the most important lesson: revenge does not need to be loud or malicious. Justice can manifest quietly, deliberately, and inevitably. Mark never begged again, never tried to manipulate the situation, never assumed he could escape the weight of his choices. Lena avoided me entirely, as though my mere presence reminded her of the accountability she could not evade. I didn't gloat. I observed, understanding that the universe has a way of balancing scales without interference. The power of truth, patience, and deliberate action had been enough to restore equilibrium. And then I understood that the secret I had carried for so long had not been a burden but a preparation. It taught me patience, discernment, and the importance of choosing when to act. It taught me that silence can be a weapon, observation a shield, and calculated patience, a form of justice far stronger than rage.